stuck here. The cops won't bother me. One of the things I noticed about this bike right away, it's so much lighter to move around. Not too much lighter, but than the V-Strom 650. It's easier to grab and push around. But the V-Strom 650 was a little bit more top heavy. Now this thing, to move it in the garage, my garage is at a slight incline, pushing it is very difficult, and that's because this bike weighs 640 pounds. It's crazy. It's a missile of a bike, but it's very difficult for somebody that weighs 150 pounds to move it up and down. So this bike has got some major advantages when it comes to lightweight. This is mostly used as a commuter, but I do love how it looks. It's very subtle, you know. It's not going to be standing out, and you're not going to be getting in trouble with the law if you ride this bike, because it's so subtle. But I do like the styling. It looks similar to the CB500. I think a lot of people might get this mixed up with the CB500. I think this bike's power is very different than the V-Strom, but riding position is similar. You don't get the really nice suspension or the really nice wind protection that the V-Strom has, but in a way it's kind of nice to get the wind in your face. Look at these guys on their bicycles, man. That's tough. That's tough work. The NC700 does feel like a very robust bike. I think it's often neglected. The beauty that I like about these bikes is that even when new, they weren't very expensive, because even with the handlebars and the fit and finish, I do realize it's a budget bike, and you can tell right away that it's a budget bike because the front suspension, for example, there's nothing spectacular about it. The suspension is not great on it, and I think a lot of riders that really would like this bike to keep for a very long time might upgrade the suspension. But that's a small task compared to the uniqueness of this bike. Of course, one of the top things for me is that the weight of this bike is actually much further down than a V-Strom 650, and I'm starting to appreciate that a lot more. A standard motorcycle, the weight feels much higher up. Now this bike is relatively slow compared to a V-Strom 650, and the 650 by Suzuki, the displacement is actually lower, so you would think it would be, oh, this is a 700, and perhaps it would be faster, but it's not. And I think the reason, this bike actually makes 20 horsepower less than the V-Strom 650, but in a way it doesn't feel like it's lacking at all, because the way it makes power is made for the real world. And that's one thing that I do appreciate, it is the way it's making power is a real world power, kind of like what I admire about the V-twin and the V-Strom, except this is taken a whole lot to another level. The suspension, it's not great on this. And I looked up the wheelbase of this bike, and it's almost exactly the same as the V-Strom 650 that I just sold. So I was kind of surprised because it feels a little bit squirmier and not as stable as the V-Strom. So that's something that I have to kind of like pay attention to. But the brakes are extremely good. For having one caliper and one disc brake, this feels like some of the better brakes I've had. I'm learning how to ride it. You know, it's a lot of times it takes a little bit of time to understand the bike, but the FJR I bought actually feels a lot harder to ride than this. You gotta admire the adventure rider position, because this thing is so easy, so maneuverable. Yeah, this bike definitely likes to go slower than the V-Strom, but with 20 less horsepower, 15 to 20 less horsepower than the V-Strom, it makes sense that it's slower. I believe that the new NC750s are a little bit more powerful and behave a little bit more like a motorcycle, but you know, it's not like I'm missing the power. It almost feels like a powerful Ninja 250, and that's a compliment. I love the European styling of this bike. The silver doesn't really work for me that well. I prefer red, the red NC700. It feels very comfortable. It feels very similar to the V-Strom or any adventure bike. And one of the things I like about this particular one is the speedo. Now, I do wish that they put a miles per gallon calculation or calculator in there. I'm kind of surprised. And I'm surprised they don't have a temperature gauge on this one. I mean, that's kind of just shoddy. It's easy enough to do that these days. I don't understand why Honda decided to skip on that. You basically just get like trip 1, trip 2, and then an odometer. But that's it's pretty simple. I really wish there was a little bit more to the electronics, because the CB500 does have that miles per gallon calculation. And the thing is, a lot of commuters that are pragmatic, they just think in terms of very basic transportation. They like to know their miles per gallon, because, you know, this bike is a calculation. It's not like it's a passion buy. So a lot of people get this knowing that it's a bike that gets close to 70 miles per gallon, and it's a 700cc, the same sort of miles per gallon you would get in a Ninja 250. That's incredible. I mean, the bike feels really good, and if the weight on this is so much further down than the V-Strom, I'm very surprised. It definitely feels like you can toss it around in corners well, but I am missing a little bit of the power. I do like it, and the difference between this and the V-Strom, you know, other than the obvious difference of the looks and the make, the engine is completely different. It's an inline 62-degree front-facing engine, and you can see the cylinders like right over there. And this one uses the lock and nut adjustment for the valves. So for a home mechanic, that makes a whole lot more sense. The styling is a lot more svelte, so it's much more narrow than the V-Strom. The V-Strom was very wide, but that also gave it a commanding presence on the road. This one feels much more like a commuter bike, and almost like a hooligan bike without the hooligan, because it's not a wheelie bike. It's not like a quick, super fast bike. And also, I like that they're going back into single headlights. It just keeps the weight down and the complexities down, so I think that's a good system. Now, one of the bad things about this NC is that they have both 17-inch wheels, and if you're into like riding gravel and off-road, you might want like at least a 19-inch front. The V-Strom's 19-inch front was quite amazing off-road, and I did take it in some nice places. So this one, it's a little bit hurt by it, because you do have a bash plate and everything here to protect it. But I kind of wish that perhaps Honda had put a larger front wheel. I guess they're going with the CB500 to compete more directly with the V-Strom, but I think this one would make a lot of sense. Of course, this is the 2012 year. I think it only makes like 40-something horsepower. The V-Strom is at like 62 horsepower, so it's quite a big difference in power. And when you ride it, it does feel like it's lacking in power compared to the V-Strom. But even with the V-Strom, you don't get it for the power. You get it for that really nice V-twin engine. And even though this one's not a V-twin, this is a pretty fantastic engine. I think it's lacking in several things. You know, the front wheel should be really a 19, but that's because I ride more, you know, on gravel. I like to go a little bit off-road. I think the V-Strom is well suited for that, but the 17-inch wheels, it's kind of a little bit of an hindrance, but it's not a big issue. And of course you have a chain drive, which is normal. Now the big thing about these is that it's known for this, and that's not the gas tank. Of course, it's, you put your key here, turn it to the right, and you have this massive storage that you can use to put a full-size helmet. it's an amazing thing. Like, it is one of the features that I really like about it. And that's the only way to make this, is by removing the gas tank, making the engine face another way, and Honda did that really well. It's well designed. For a commuter, you don't need luggage. You just put your stuff in there and you're done. But of course, because of this, they had to relocate the tank, the gas tank over there. And look at this, the way you open it, you just turn it, then you pop that open. I like to take my key out, and then you have the gas tank there. Now, the reason this is not really a great tourer is because a lot of people put stuff back here, including me. And I don't want to be like removing stuff to get to the gas tank. So that's kind of an issue. That's something that I think Honda should have corrected. They shouldn't have put the gas tank here. Even though it's a great idea, the concept is a little bit worse, or the concept is better than the actual practicality of it. Now, to close it, it's nice that it actually stays upright as well. To remove the front seat, there are bolts here, and this kind of pops out. The battery, by the way, is not over here. It's in the tank. Let me open that back up. These two bolts here, you remove it, and the battery's there. That's another great idea, because you can run electrics from here to here without running them underneath the gas tank. And everybody that's had a motorcycle and had electrics and GPSs, you know how annoying it is to fit underneath the gas tank and always run it. So that's a much better system. So let's get out of here. The bike itself, the wind protection is not great, and of course that's easily solved with a aftermarket windscreen. You know, it is a very pleasant bike to ride. It's not, you know, in a way I almost feel like it's a hybrid. When you drive a hybrid, no matter what, you know, it could be like a BMW i3, Prius, you know, a lot of people would make fun of it, but they're actually quicker than what most people think they are. You know, I always surprise people when I pull out of red lights, because everybody just assumes it's slow. But it's not that slow. This bike is not that slow. It's still faster than most cars. And it's very easy to reach the ground. I can flat foot this. My V-Strom, I struggled a bit. And I think it's the same seat height. But the only reason it feels a little bit different is that the V-Strom, the seats were much wider. So when you have wide seats, your legs have to kind of spread out a little bit more. This one is not the case, because they tapered the seat in the front a lot further down, so you don't have to reach too much to get to it. So I think there's something very beautiful about this bike. Something great about it. It's just it's an inexpensive bike in a world of very expensive heavy bikes that people have forgotten what motorcycles are all about. It's incredible. Everybody's getting these very fast, powerful bikes. There was a time where people started to go back to small bikes, and it lasted a very short amount of time. And now everybody's buying extremely big, fast, and heavy bikes. But this bike has everything that most people would want in a very small package that's very easy to live with. But I don't know if it's very popular. I don't see a lot of them. They do hold their value in the marketplace, which is, I guess it's good for me. But it's a fantastic bike, and if you guys want a good commuter, this is probably one of the better ones you could. Alright squids, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.